Hey there! In this video, I will walk you through my full VS Code setup. Over time, many of you have asked what theme I'm using and wanted to see my entire settings.json file. So, I'm doing a full deep dive. I will show you everything step by step, how to set up the theme, which settings and extensions I use, and why I use them. This one is going to be longer than my usual videos. If you want to jump straight to the parts you are interested about, you can use the timestamp on the video. Or if you just want to copy the contents of the settings.json file, you can go to neutrondev.com and grab it from there. You will also find links in the description to all the resources I will mention throughout the video. Before we jump in, a huge shout out to everyone supporting this channel, especially the 2.43k subscribers. Your support helps me continue creating clear and concise tutorials. Now let's get back to setting up VS Code. To start from scratch, I'm going to create a new profile. Go to File, Preferences, Profile, and then Profiles. Click New Profile, and I will name it Tutorial. But you can name it however you like. And since I want VS Code in its default state, I will not import anything from my current profile. I will press Create. And then let's use this profile for current window. Since most of you asked about the theme I'm using or wanted to know how I set it up, I will start with that. In the last 2 years, I think I changed my theme only once. In my older videos, I used a theme called Material Theme, and I use it exactly as it came, without any tweaks. But one day, I woke up to find it removed from the marketplace. And it turns out Microsoft found some suspicious code in it, which is pretty concerning. And I hope the theme's author never managed to exfiltrate our data or do anything shady. Well, this was about 9 months ago, and since then I've been using another theme that I tweaked a bit to make it look somewhat similar to the old one. And without further ado, let's install the theme and set it up. Press Ctrl Shift and X or Command Shift X on Mac to open the marketplace. Then search for Better Material Theme Darker High Contrast. Pretty long name, but it is what it is. And this one by Crazy Fluff. Given the circumstances, I checked the themes repository to make sure my data isn't going to North Korea. And luckily, everything looked clean. So let's go ahead and install this extension. The colors are based on Material Theme, but I'm not really a fan of the high contrast part because it kind of burns my eyes. So let's open the settings.json file and configure the theme. Press Ctrl Shift P or Command Shift P on Mac and select Preferences, Open User Settings, JSON. I like to keep the settings grouped by category, so I will add a comment called Theme. And here I will place all theme related settings. Now I want to replace this loud, punchy green with something more neutral. And to do that, I will use a setting called Workbench Color Customizations. I think the status bar currently has the most green in it, so I will start with that. I will use the status bar foreground and set its color to white. So that would be 6 Fs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. Now I want to change the color of the cursor as well. As you can see, at this moment it's green. And for that, let's use editor cursor dot foreground and set the value to default. And now the color of the cursor is white. Next up, I want to change the color of the editor line number in the gutter. And to do that, I will use editor line number dot active foreground. And let's change its color to white. Nice. Now let's change the color of the border of the active tab. Currently it's green. I will use tab.active border and I want to set the color to light cyan, and that will be 84 and 4Fs. I think it would be good to have a visual response when I hover over a tab. And to make that happen, let's change the background and the file name color. So to change the background on hover, we can use the tab.hover background, and I will set the value to 6/4. And now to change the file name color, let's use tab.hover foreground and let's set the color to white. And I think it looks great and the theme is really coming together. Next, I would like to change the colors within the inline suggestion widget. When I type, the first suggestion is green. To change the color, let's use list.active selection foreground and let's set the color to light cyan. Now let's do the same for list.inactive selection foreground, and let's set the value to light cyan. This setting also impacts other areas of VS Code. I will comment this out, maybe you will see the difference. This setting changes the color of the active file in the Explorer area, but also of the active terminal. And I think this is pretty good. Now only the matching characters are green. The rest of the word is light cyan. But I want the matching characters to be light cyan as well. So let's use the setting list.highlight foreground and let's use the same color. Alright, this did the trick only for the first suggestion, but now let's apply the same logic for the other suggestions as well. So that would be editor suggest widget dot highlight foreground, and let's paste the same light cyan color. Now if I type, all the suggestions are using the same color, even the matching characters. Awesome. There are still a few places where the green shows up. The activity bar badge, the active terminal border, the search widget, the scroll bar, and some links such as open in editor, other commands, and some elements in the settings. Let's address this. To change the color of the activity bar badge, let's use activity bar badge dot background and set the same color. Now, to change the color of the active terminal border, this one here, we can use panel title dot active border, use the same color, press save. Next one is the scroll bar, and let's use the setting called scrollbar slider dot active background, and in this case I will go for a darker blue, and that would be 84 for Fs and 50. And now let's change the color of this search widget, and that would be editor widget dot resize border, and let's use the same color. And now for the links such as this one, open in editor, we can use text link dot foreground with the same color. Awesome. This one is still green, but we will address it in a moment. I also want to tweak the background color of the current code selection line. Right now, to me it feels a bit too dark, so I would like something more transparent. We can use the setting editor.line highlight background, and I will go for the following color, 2A, 2A, 2A. And I think now it looks a bit better. When I hover the command palette, you will notice the green is still there. Same thing when you actually open the command palette, there is still a green link style text. Now let's fix those. To change the text color on hover, we can use menu bar dot selection foreground, and let's use the same light cyan color. And to update the color of the links inside the command palette, such as this one, we can use the setting called picker group dot foreground, and let's use the same light cyan. To change the header colors in the settings menu, we can use settings.header foreground, and I will use the same light cyan color. Awesome. And now if I change a setting like this font size over here, it indicates that it was modified. I also want to change the color of this line, and for that I will use settings.modified item indicator and use light cyan. Now I will switch this back. Awesome. Next up, let's check the context menu you get on right click. And as you can see, there is still some green lingering here as well. We can tweak this by using menu.selection foreground, and let's use the same light cyan color. And that wraps up the color adjustments. But there is one more thing. Material theme just doesn't feel complete without the iconic file and folder icons. And to bring those in, let's install the material icon theme extension by Philip Keefe. And once installed, check your settings.json file, and you can see that the extension adds this new setting automatically. I will move this up here, and if you want to compare the old icons with the new ones, just comment this setting out. It's faster than disabling and reloading the extension. Right, now that the theme setup is done, let's move on. I will show you a few editor settings I use to keep my screen space clean and my workflow smooth. The first thing that bothers me when I look at the editor is that the text is too small and takes up only a tiny portion of the screen. I want to be able to zoom it using the mouse wheel. To make that happen, we can use the setting editor.mouse wheel zoom with a value of true. And now I can zoom the editor text by holding Ctrl and scrolling the mouse wheel. Or if you're a Mac, you can use Command and the mouse wheel. Perfect. Now let's talk a bit about the font size. If you zoom with the mouse wheel, you don't technically need to set a font size. But since we are already in the editor settings, let's set a default font size anyway, so we don't have to zoom in every time we open a new editor. And now let's set editor.font size, and I will go with 20. Now I will zoom out a bit, and it's perfect. Another important aspect for readability is the font. I have been using JetBrains Mono for a few months now, and it works really well for me. If you want a more detailed walkthrough on how to install JetBrains Mono, I recommend checking out this video. In my case, since the font is already installed, I can use it by setting editor.font family with the value of JetBrains Mono. This font also supports ligatures. These are symbols that combine two or more characters into a single form to fix spacing issues or improve the overall aesthetics. I will show you in just a moment. So to enable ligatures, we can use editor.font ligatures and set the value to true. And as you can see here, instead of showing 3 equal signs, it displays a single equal symbol made out of 3 horizontal lines. If we choose to go with 2 equal signs, then we get a slightly longer equal symbol, and with a regular one, we get a shorter version. If we use the not equal signs operator, we get the same styled equals symbols, but this time crossed out with a line. Personally, I think it looks much more cleaner. But what do you think? Do you prefer the code with ligatures or without? Leave me a comment below. Now I want to talk a bit about word separators and why I think they help when navigating code, especially with keybinds like Ctrl and left or right arrow, and when you try to select text with a double click. Let's take, for example, my word. If I use Ctrl and left arrow or right arrow, VS Code doesn't treat the underscore as a separator. If I replace the underscore with a dash, VS Code recognizes the dash as a separator, and the same with dot. However, in my case, sometimes I use an underscore to name variables, especially in Rust, and I want the underscore to be treated as a word separator. And to make that happen, we can use the setting editor.word separators, and I will not use this string of characters, but I will paste my own, which is this one. And now if I go back and change the dot to underscore, you can see that VS Code now treats the underscore as a word separator. And basically every character in this string right here acts as a separator. If I take, for example, the which one? // now the / is a word separator. Now that the file has gotten pretty big, it would help if I could scroll faster using the middle click. And for that, we can use the setting editor.scroll on middle click with a value of true. Now, when I press the middle mouse button and scroll to the file, it goes much more faster. Next up, I want to show you a setting that I think doesn't get enough credit. If I paste this ugly, unformatted JavaScript code, the editor doesn't format it. It just pastes as is. It would help me a lot if VS Code formatted the code for me. And to make that happen, we can use the setting editor.formatOnPaste with a value of true. And now when I paste the same code, the editor formats it. One more thing that I want to change here is this. When I open the search widget with Ctrl F or Command F, the editor shifts down a bit. As if the search widget is pushing it down. And I want to stop this from happening. Let's use the editor.find.add extra space on top with a value of false. Now, if I go back up, press Ctrl F, the search widget doesn't push the editor down anymore. Nice. Now, let's focus a bit on the editor tabs. When I open a lot of tabs, as you can see, VS Code keeps them all on one row and lets me scroll through them using this tiny scroll bar. And I'm not particularly fond of this. I prefer to see all the open tabs without having to scroll. This way I only keep the tabs I actually use, and to me they're much easier to access. To get the tabs to wrap onto multiple lines, let's use the setting workbench.editor.wrapTabs with a value of true. Sometimes I pin the tabs I don't want to lose, or the ones that I access the most when I'm working on a task that forces me to open a ton of files. And by default, VS Code places pin tabs at the start of the tab list. But over time, I've noticed that it's actually more helpful for me if pin tabs sit on a separate row instead of being mixed with the unpinned tabs. Let me show you what I mean. Let's add the setting workbench.editor.pinned tabs on separate row with a value of true. And once I press save, the pin tabs are placed on their own row, making them stand out much better. Now I want to talk about one of the most important settings that I think should be the default. If I open the apple and orange.js file, you will notice that its title is italic. I will explain why it matters in a moment. If I switch to character occurrence in a string.js file, VS Code opens it in the same tab. I don't like that. When I click a file, I want to open in its own tab, not replace the existing one. To me, this flow feels wrong. There is a way to tell VS Code to keep the current tab and open the next file in a new tab. If you want to avoid replacing the existing file instead of single-clicking it, you double-click it like this, or you click it once and then click its name in the tab bar. If the title is no longer italic, this means that the next file will open in a separate tab. But to me, all of this extra clicking is just unnecessary friction. So let's fix this properly with one setting. Workbench .editor.enable preview with a value of false. Let's close the files, and now I can open any file with just a single click. It always opens its own tab, which is perfect. You have probably noticed that when I open a new tab, this hint shows up. It appears whenever the editor is empty. Personally, I don't find it very helpful, so I prefer to hide it. We can use the setting workbench.editor.empty.hint with a value of hidden. Let's open a new tab, and as you can see, the hint is no longer here. One last editor-related setting that I find useful is workbench.editor.close file on delete with a value of true. This automatically closes any file you have open in VS Code if it gets deleted by another process like another app, or if you remove it manually from your operating system. If you want to learn more about this setting, you can check out this video. Now let's talk quickly about the terminal. Right now, when I open the terminal, it launches PowerShell by default. I prefer Git Bash instead. If you want a full walkthrough on how to set up your terminal, I already have a video where I go into all the details. For this video, I will stick to just two targeted settings. To specify which terminal should open by default, let's use terminal.integrated.default profile.windows, and I will go with Git Bash. You will have to restart VS Code for a change to apply. I also like to keep the terminal clean, so I don't want the previous session or its history to be restored. To disable that behavior, let's use terminal.integrated.enable persistent sessions, and let's set the value to false. There are still a few things I want to tweak, both in terms of appearance and how VS Code behaves. I'm going to create a new category called Workbench. And I know this might look a bit confusing based on how I have organized the settings so far, but I prefer grouping them in a way that makes sense to me, not strictly by how VS Code categorizes them internally. You could say that the theme-related settings also belong to Workbench, and you would be absolutely right. Technically, they do. That's why they are part of this Workbench namespace. But for me, it's more helpful to keep theme-specific settings in their own category, because the Workbench namespace contains a lot of other settings that are not theme-related. Alright, first off, I want to get rid of these two arrows. I never use them, and I prefer to keep this area clean. To hide them, we'll use the setting workbench.navigationControl.enabled with a value of false. On the right side of the command palette, there is this Copilot bubble chat that I also want to hide. I don't usually use Copilot that often, so for me it makes sense to hide it. If you do use Copilot on a daily basis, maybe you will benefit from keeping it. I will, however, hide it for now with chat.commandCenter.enabled with a value of false. I also want to hide the status bar. I usually don't use it and prefer to keep it out of sight. When I do need it, I just enable it temporarily and hide it again afterwards. So to hide it, we use the setting workbench.statusbar.visible and let's set it to false. Now we have more space on the screen. Another area I rarely use is the activity bar. Let's hide it using the setting workbench.activitybar.location and set its value to hidden. Another setting I find important is controlling which browser opens when I click links within VS Code, such as those found in a README file. We can set this up using workbench.external browser, and in my case I will go with Brave. If you want more details on this, head over to this video where I cover it in depth. One last thing I want to change is the sticky scroll in the Explorer. Let me show you. As you can see, the folder headers stay stuck as I scroll. I'm not a fan of sticky scroll in this case, so I want to disable it. And to make that happen, let's go ahead to settings.json file and use workbench.tree.enable sticky scroll and set it to false. Alright, this wraps up the section where I went over setting up the theme, editor, terminal, and a few tweaks to give you more screen space and easier navigation. Now let's move on to extensions. My philosophy on extensions is quite simple. The fewer, the better. I try to use as few extensions as possible for a couple of reasons. VS Code is an extremely popular editor, which naturally attracts predators. There are plenty of cases where malicious actors create extensions that look shiny and useful at first glance, but actually contain a backdoor or steal personal data. Just like I mentioned at the start of the video about the theme I used before. There are also cases where even popular extensions have been hijacked because the author got hacked in one way or another. So from a security standpoint, the fewer extensions you have, the safer you are. Another reason I prefer minimal extensions is that they bloat your editor. Every extension you install adds overhead and can slow VS Code down. Some extensions also overlap in functionality, so you have to be careful not to end up with the same feature implemented multiple times. These are the two main reasons I like to keep my extension to a minimum. And regarding security, Microsoft is constantly fighting off malicious actors, and I think they do a pretty good job protecting the marketplace. But as developers, we also need to stay cautious and not leave any doors open. With that said, let me show you which extensions I actually use. I have already mentioned and covered the usefulness of Better Material Theme Darker Higher Contrast and Material Icon Theme extensions, so we can check them off the list. A useful extension for everyone, no matter what language or tech stack you are using, assuming that you are using Git, is GitLens Git Supercharged by GitKraken.com. The community edition gives you pretty much everything you need for the day-to-day Git work. You can run git blame directly in the editor, squash commits, create branches, open pull requests, and much more. For advanced stuff like AI power features, you can try the paid version. This is not a sponsorship, GitKraken didn't pay me to say this, but hey, I am open to collaboration if someone from GitKraken happens to see this video. The next extension on the list is WSL by Microsoft. If you are on Windows and want to run a Linux environment, you need WSL. And this extension makes working with WSL a whole lot easier. There is nothing more to add here, so let's go straight to the next extension, which is Sublime Text, Keymap and Settings Importer. Before using VS Code, I used Atom, and before that, I used Sublime Text. Sublime Text is an amazing editor, and I still use it alongside VS Code. I got so used to Sublime's key bindings that I really wanted to have them in VS Code as well, and that's exactly what this extension does. I work with JSON files a lot, and this extension does exactly what it should. It formats your JSON. Let's see it in action. To use it, press Ctrl+Shift+P or Command+Shift+P on Mac, and then run Prettify JSON. Now, the downside of this extension is that it was last updated 9 years ago. So there's a good chance you might run into bugs, but so far I haven't had any issues with it. And since the extension's repository isn't public and it hasn't been updated in 9 years, I prefer to disable auto update for it. If you have a recommendation for a similar extension, do let me know. Next on the list is Rainbow CSV. I find this extension useful because it makes CSV files much easier to read in VS Code. It has other features too, but that's mainly what I use it for. If you want more details, I also made a dedicated video about it. Next up is .env. This extension adds syntax highlighting for .env files. Simple, but exactly what you need. EditorConfig for VS Code is another extension I use in most of my projects. The .editorconfig file is meant to enforce consistent formatting rules across different editors and IDEs in a project. If you are interested in finding more about EditorConfig, I recommend checking out the official website. Or let me know in the comments section if you would like me to make a video about it. Next up is Even Better TOML. Since I also work in Rust, I need syntax highlighting for .toml files, along with validation, folding, and formatting. Even Better TOML takes care of all of that exactly as it should. Since I mentioned Rust, a must-have extension is Rust Analyzer. It provides code completion, the ability to go to definitions, find all references, syntax highlighting, and much more. If you are not using this extension, you are really doing yourself a disservice. Besides Rust, I also work with PHP, and unfortunately, the old elephant doesn't get enough attention, and VS Code doesn't include basic features like namespace resolving out of the box. And to fill that gap, I use PHP Namespace Resolver, which helps me import classes and even sort them by size and alphabetically. If you want more details about this extension, I made a dedicated video about it. Next up is PHP Intelephense. This extension provides a plethora of features that will make your life easier. Every PHP developer should have this extension installed. In the past few years, I have mostly worked with Laravel, and until recently, there wasn't an official extension for it. Fortunately, this year Laravel released the official Laravel extension. It comes packed with features that any Laravel developer will enjoy. Sometimes it can be a bit buggy, but the Laravel team is actively improving it, and I'm confident it will become the go-to extension for every Laravel developer. And last but not least, we have Vitest. I work with Vitest in both Laravel and non-Laravel projects, and it works beautifully. With the Vitest extension, you can run, debug, or watch tests directly in VS Code, get cover support, and many other useful features. I have installed 15 extensions in total. If I were to create separate profiles for each tech stack, like PHP, Rust, and JavaScript, I would end up using even fewer extensions per profile. And that's what I would recommend for you as well. Keep your editor lean and avoid loading it with unnecessary extensions. And that wraps up this video. We went through configuring the theme, setting up the editor to use space efficiently, and I showed you the extensions I use. I explained what each setting does and why I use it. As I mentioned at the start of this video, if you want to copy the entire settings.json file, you can find it on my website, neutrondev.com. I have also included links in the video description to make it easier for you to access all the information you need. If you have any questions or ideas for other videos, feel free to leave a comment below. I do read them all. I hope this video was helpful and that you picked up at least one useful tip. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the other videos on this channel. See you in the next one.